Is it possible that a simple line at an airport holds a secret capable of shaking the emotions of millions around the world? Or are we instead witnessing a small fragment of a much larger story deliberately left vague, as if only those who are sensitive enough can read its signals? That question arose instantly when seemingly ordinary images began to circulate, moving from one screen to another, from one timeline to the next, until they finally exploded into an unavoidable global conversation on a morning that appeared to unfold like any other at Gimpo International Airport. A young man stood in line. There was no red carpet, no official camera flashes, no grand announcements. Yet that was precisely where the strangeness lay. The man was Jungkook, a member of BTS, a figure whose presence is almost always accompanied by waves of attention, no matter how hard he tries to blend into the crowd. This time, he was not wearing stage outfits or the glamorous style typical of a global celebrity. He appeared in a worn-looking gray hoodie with graffiti motifs, a New York Yankees cap pulled low, a black mask covering part of his face, and a crossbody bag hanging casually from his body. At a glance, he looked like anyone else. But to a trained eye, or perhaps one too accustomed to observing, this was not a sight that could be easily overlooked. The photos were first uploaded by the X account at Taekomania, then spread at a speed that was almost impossible to control. Within minutes, thousands of eyes were fixed on small details that might previously have seemed meaningless. The direction of Jungkook's gaze, his body posture, the way he pulled his hoodie as if trying to disappear, and the presence of two other figures around him. Standing beside him was a man strongly believed to be his manager, wearing a black cap and a dark jacket, with a calm yet alert demeanor. Slightly behind them, a woman wearing glasses was seen smiling, her expression becoming one of the most mysterious elements in the entire series of images. Who was she? Why did her smile seem so strikingly contrasted with Jungkook's effort to remain hidden? The caption accompanying the post appeared simple, even sweet. Jungkook is with his manager, official work? Have a safe flight, Jungkookie. Yet it was precisely the question marks in the middle of the sentence that sparked the fire. Those two seemingly light words opened the door to limitless speculation. Official work? For ARMY, those question marks were not merely linguistic symbols, but an invitation to interpret, connect, and construct theories. In a short time, the post garnered more than 5,500 likes and thousands of views, turning into a new center of gravity in the global fandom conversation. Why was Jungkook's presence at the airport so shocking? Why did details that seemed trivial trigger such a massive emotional wave? The answer lies in a context that is unwritten yet collectively understood by fans. Jungkook is not merely a singer. He is a symbol, a representation of a long journey, dedication, and an emotional bond built over many years between BTS and ARMY. Every step he takes, every clothing choice, even every facial expression is often read as a hidden message. So when he appears in a public space under circumstances that are not entirely clear, it is natural for the public to wonder, what is really behind this journey? Speculation grew wildly. Was this simply a personal trip coincidentally captured on camera? Or was there a specific agenda deliberately kept secret? The presence of a manager by his side offered a clue that was hard to ignore. For some, it was enough to indicate that the trip was not without purpose. For others, it was the opposite. The less official information available, the stronger the urge to fill the gaps with assumptions. Yet the story did not stop at mere conjecture. Reactions from ARMY across various social media platforms showed how deeply this event touched emotional layers. Some felt shocked, others excited, while some were angry and disappointed. Several comments appeared in firm tones, questioning why such photos had to be shared publicly. Sharing these pictures wasn't necessary, or can't they have their own privacy? Wrote one user, reflecting the unease felt by many fans. Other comments were even harsher, demanding that the post be removed because it was seen as disrespectful to Jungkook's personal space. Amid the buzz of speculation and ethical debate, reports emerged that added another layer of tension to the narrative. Several accounts mentioned that Jungkook was seen running to avoid cameras at the airport. If true, this detail dramatically changed the tone of the story. From merely a shocking sighting, it transformed into a picture of discomfort, of someone who may not have been ready or willing to be the center of attention at that moment. Issues surrounding obsessive fans resurfaced, bringing with them long-standing discussions about the boundary between love and invasion of privacy. Meanwhile, on the other side of the digital world, other pieces of information began to be connected. Entertainment media reported that Jungkook was suspected of heading to Japan, a detail that immediately reminded the public of earlier news about Jimin also being seen at the airport heading to the same destination. Two big names, two closely timed journeys, one destination. Was this a coincidence? Or a clue deliberately left open? For ARMY, the question felt like a puzzle waiting to be solved. News headlines began to appear, each competing for attention with increasingly bold narratives. That is Jungkook. BTS member flies to Japan after Jimin, leaving ARMY convinced something big is coming, wrote one entertainment outlet, as if asserting that whatever was happening behind the scenes would have a significant impact. Such sentences function not only as reports, but as emotional catalysts, reinforcing the belief that this moment was far from ordinary. Interestingly, amid the flood of information and opinions, one party chose to remain silent. To this day, there has been no official confirmation from HYB regarding the purpose or context of the trip. This silence, rather than dampening speculation, only strengthened it. In the modern entertainment world, silence is often read as strategy, as an empty space that gives the public freedom to interpret. And ARMY, with all their creativity and emotional sensitivity, never lack imagination. What really happened that morning at Gimpo Airport? Was the smiling woman with glasses behind Jungkook merely an ordinary passenger, or a significant figure whose role has yet to be revealed? Why did Jungkook seem so intent on hiding his identity? And why did this moment feel different from previous sightings? These questions continue to swirl, creating a narrative tension that makes it difficult for the public to look away. One thing is certain. This incident once again highlights the classic dilemma faced by South Korean celebrities in an era of global popularity: how to protect personal space when every step can become public consumption. For Jungkook, that morning may have been just another part of a journey he had to take. But for millions of fans, it was a signal, a puzzle, and perhaps even a promise of something bigger in the future. And this is where the story has only just begun. The next chapter will take us deeper into the vortex of speculation, emotion, and theories that make a single encounter at an airport feel far more significant than it appears on the surface. Within hours after the photos of Jungkook at Gimpo Airport spread, the digital spaces inhabited by ARMY around the world seemed to pulse with the same question, even if expressed in hundreds of different versions. What is really happening, and why does it feel far bigger than just an ordinary trip? Social media was no longer merely a place to share information, but an emotional courtroom where every detail was judged, analyzed, and debated. The gray hoodie that had previously seemed ordinary was now interpreted as a deliberate symbol of disguise. The cap pulled low was seen not just as a fashion choice, but as body language speaking of a desire not to be recognized. Even the crossbody bag slung across his body did not escape speculation. Was it a work bag, a personal bag, or merely a coincidence? Every small element turned into a clue, as if the public were assembling a large puzzle from limited visual fragments. Yet the center of the conversation was not Jungkook alone. The figure of the man believed to be his manager, standing calmly beside him, reinforced the narrative that this journey carried a specific context. In the Korean entertainment world, the presence of a manager often serves as an indicator that something is structured, planned, and not entirely personal. It was therefore unsurprising that many fans began linking this moment to the possibility of a project being quietly prepared. This was further fueled by reports stating that Jimin had been seen at the airport heading in the same direction the day before. Two big names, two closely timed moments, one shared destination. This combination felt far too neat to ignore. This was where emotions began to split. Some ARMY felt a surge of excitement that was difficult to hide. A quiet hope emerged, a belief that something big was being arranged behind the scenes. They read this journey as a signal, as the opening sign of a new chapter that would eventually be revealed. On the other hand, a wave of much heavier emotions surfaced: worry, anger, and even collective guilt. Many questioned whether their excitement was actually contributing to the pressure Jungkook had to endure. Protest-filled comments began to appear, not directed at Jungkook, but at those who had spread the photos. If it wasn't private, you would have seen it through the media, wrote one user, implying a clear line between official coverage and candid images taken without consent. These statements were not merely opinions, but reflections of a growing awareness among fans about the importance of maintaining boundaries. Ironically, this awareness emerged precisely amid the massive consumption of content that crossed those boundaries. The tension reached a more emotional point when reports circulated that Jungkook had been seen running to avoid cameras at the airport. This image triggered reactions far deeper than simple curiosity. Many ARMY admitted feeling sad, even hurt, imagining their idol having to avoid the spotlight in such a way. The narrative shifted from a mysterious journey to an unseen discomfort. At this point, the story about the airport was no longer about where Jungkook was going, but about what he may have been feeling at that moment. The issue of obsessive fans resurfaced as a heated topic. Long-standing discussions about saccine behavior came back into focus, carrying with them the collective trauma of a fandom that had spent years witnessing repeated violations of their idol's privacy. Many began to ask whether, as fans, they had truly learned from the past, or whether the same patterns were simply repeating themselves in different forms. This question echoed amid conspiracy theories and secret project speculations, creating a sharp contrast between euphoria and empathy. Amid all of this, entertainment media played a complex dual role. On one hand, they reported the available facts, citing viral posts and public reactions. On the other, the headlines they chose often amplified the dramatic tone, as if every step Jungkook took were a sign of something monumental. Phrases like "leaving ARMY convinced something big is coming" did not merely report fan beliefs, but actively shaped them. Media and fandom reflected each other's emotions, creating a feedback loop that was difficult to stop. What made the situation even more compelling was the absence of any official statement. Silence from the agency became an empty space filled by other voices. In this context, silence was not neutral. It became a canvas upon which the public painted their hopes, fears, and imaginations. Some ARMY interpreted the silence as a deliberate strategy, part of a larger narrative. Others saw it as protection, an effort to preserve privacy amid a storm of speculation. Both interpretations were equally valid, and it was precisely there that the emotional tension elicited. It is fascinating to observe how a single moment at an airport was able to open discussions that extended far beyond the event itself. It forced the public to confront the contradictions inherent in their role as fans. Between the desire to know and the responsibility to respect, between a sense of ownership and the awareness that idols are still human beings with personal space. Jungkook, in his silence, seemed to become a mirror reflecting this dilemma back to ARMY. The smiling woman with glasses behind Jungkook also remained a lingering mystery. For some, she was merely a background figure accidentally caught on camera. For others, she became a symbol of all that remained unknown, a representation of stories yet untold. Rather than fading, this mystery continued to live on in online conversations, enriching the narrative with ever more layers of interpretation as time passed. The intensity of the discussion showed no sign of fading. Every new post, every additional comment, felt like fuel keeping the fire alive. Yet beneath it all, a clear thread began to emerge. This incident was not only about Jungkook or BTS, but about the complex relationship between celebrities, media, and the public in the digital age. A relationship filled with love, expectation, and often painful contradictions. As the clamor of comments began to reach a point of saturation and timelines felt crowded with repetitive analyses, it was silence that slowly took over the main stage. There was no clarification, no official statement, no explanation arrived to close the questions that had already grown too large. Yet strangely, this silence did not kill the story, it gave it new breath instead. In that empty space, ARMY's imagination worked the hardest, interpreting every remaining detail, connecting small fragments into a picture that felt increasingly real. Jungkook's journey, which initially appeared simple, gradually transformed into a symbol. Not only a symbol of mystery, but a symbol of collective longing. A longing for good news, for certainty, for the moment when all questions would finally find their answers. Many fans began to realize that their emotional reactions were not triggered solely by the airport photos, but by an accumulation of feelings long held inside. Unspoken longing, continuously postponed hopes, and emotional bonds built over many years now found their release in one unexpected moment. Here, the meaning of the journey became far deeper than mere movement from one place to another. It turned into a narrative about how a public figure never truly walks alone. Every step Jungkook took carried the projections of millions of people, each with their own hopes and interpretations. Even his attempts to hide his identity, pulling his hoodie lower, lowering his head, were read as emotional messages. For some ARMY, it felt like a sign of exhaustion, for others a gesture of caution, and for still others proof that behind the global spotlight, Jungkook remains a human being in need of space. Discussions about privacy also grew more mature over time. If at first anger was directed at those who spread the photos, many fans later began to reflect on their own roles. Did their curiosity add pressure? Did seemingly harmless clicks, likes, and shares actually prolong the cycle of privacy violations? These questions were not easy to answer, but their presence signaled an important shift in fandom awareness. This was no longer just about defending an idol, but about building a healthier relationship between the public and the figures they love. Yet behind that reflection, hope continued to slip through. Reports suggesting that Jungkook was heading to Japan, following Jimin, persisted as a narrative difficult to let go of. For many ARMY, it felt like a puzzle piece that fit too perfectly to ignore. Two members, two journeys, one destination. This combination fueled the belief that something was being prepared with great care. Entertainment media amplified this tone as well, writing in an almost conspiratorial manner, as if the world were standing on the edge of a major revelation. And yet, this is where the paradox lies. The greater the hope that is built, the greater the risk of disappointment. Some more cautious fans began reminding one another not to sink too deeply into speculation. They emphasized that whatever happens, Jungkook's well-being is what matters most. Phrases like "we all miss Jungkook, but that doesn't justify invading his privacy" circulated widely, becoming a kind of mantra attempting to balance euphoria with empathy. In the end, this secret journey may never be fully revealed in the way many imagine. There may be no grand announcement, no spectacular surprise that follows. But does that strip the event of its meaning? On the contrary, the incident at the airport opened an important conversation about boundaries, about expectations, and about how fan love can become a double-edged sword.